At this point in time, Delhi is unlivable.
Several areas in New Delhi were covered under a thick layer of smog.
After a brief respite,
Delhi's air quality index
has returned
to the severe category.
The world where we live in probably isn't going to be livable in the long term.
BigBasket has been in commerce for a very long time. I am a loyal customer for more than 10 plus years.
Thank you.
Is hiring experienced leaders early overrated for scaling startup?
Absolutely.
What has been your experience?
I have been through this journey and I think I had to adapt and I think I have to
What changes for a product manager?
bring an element of stability. You can't be just running around and hustling all the time. You might be trying to measure something which probably is not what your consumers want.
Can you still hustle in a founder mode?
It's extremely hard to do a founder role because of the expectations of the
All right, welcome to yet another episode, and this time I'm super excited to host none other than Tejas Vyas. Tejas, welcome to this episode.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, and yeah, talking about products, from the very early days that I have witnessed a lot of product events, you have been definitely there, and I have learned just attending so many of your sessions. So this is personally a milestone for me to be able to host you in my podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Today I'm going to start with the most I would say the hottest question right now that we are asking, right? AI is just everywhere. And the more I talk in my sessions or people around me, whether it is engineering, whether it is QA, it is project management, product management, the one question that keeps coming up is that, are these disciplines going to be dead in the next few years? Or are they already dead, right? So in context of AI, especially for product management, what is your take on that?
Great question. Great start. See, I don't like to talk about doomsday scenarios, but I think we are in a stage in the world where I think everyone around us as an ecosystem needs to start understanding what AI brings to the table. And more importantly, figure out ways to upskill ourselves and get a know-how on how the world is operating with AI coming in. Now, you asked specifically about some of the disciplines that. So let me talk about my favorite, product management. I've been operating it for a long time now. I think product managers, the way they operate, and I see them breaking into three buckets. There are companies or there are product managers who are constantly innovating the discipline and trying to create, new ways on how to do product management. There's a middle layer where a lot of product managers just do mix of both, project management and product management, and trying to improve business while at the same time executing. And there are companies who still don't understand product management. I think all these need to go one level up. I think the innovators need to start bringing in more elements of AI and really take their organizations to a completely new level. There's just so much the company can unravel with AI. And the middle layer needs to evolve and add more AI into their skill so that they kind of move slightly to the left towards implementing and adding value to the business, while the rightmost one needs to adapt more. So product management towards with the AI boom will continue to operate. But if you are not upskilling yourself in what AI can do, and if you continue to operate with legacy ways of doing product management, probably you are not going to move forward. As regards to engineering, well, you can get code written in a matter of seconds now. So here is my thought that even developers and engineers need to start bringing in more AI into work. There's no ego here. Because the more you're bringing in, the more quality code that you'll bring in. AI writes at an average level, it writes a lot more cleaner code. So if you don't adapt to it and learn from it, I think your job is also at risk. So I think this is an era for upskilling. It's a very clear sign for everyone to learn and adapt and upskill themselves because the future looks glorious. I think there's just so much AI can do to improve our efficiencies and kind of do things that matter more for all of us.
I can't agree more, right? Especially now with this whole agentic AI. And as I was sharing with you while we were chatting, that I myself was trying to create a workflow with a couple of agents. So I think the day that for product management, is probably going to evolve much more faster with AI, and we are going to be surrounded by more agents, more AI powered tools. And I think that's where you say that, the context, the customer empathy, the business acumen, that is where I think the power of a PM will lie, and leverage on these tools to be able to deliver more delightful products and to be able to solve more complex problems.
Yeah.
Right.
So chiming in here, how does this make a PM's role more powerful? So if I have this gamut of tools, which doesn't even need me to build too much, taking a developer's time or an engineer's time, there are just so many experiments with the ability of these tools that you don't need a coder. You just can figure out something and just play with the market, run your experiments, get sharp insights. And there are tools where you can just generate some fascinating charts for you, draw this. You don't need anyone to code for this, and everything is in your hands. So I think this is literally handing a PM a kind of a Brahmastra kind of a tool. I'm using the word because what you have in hand is just doesn't need anyone. You have sharper insights, much faster insights without any build. Your overall cost to run the business comes down. But yes, like I said, a PM needs to evolve and try to figure out these tools and get a hang of it, because the skill set here is how do you leverage these tools to the maximum to bring value to the business.
Absolutely. And probably a lot of things which this AI tool may not have context, like let's say compliance, legal, right? And we will talk about some of the self-inflicted problems that we have related to sustainability. A PM needs to be much more sensitive and develop their competency in those areas and see how we solve for them.
Sure.
Right? So yeah, completely. So I think from where we are as a country, as a from a product maturity model, I think this is a very, very exciting times, and I completely agree. I think we see a lot of variance of the definition of a product manager or a product owner in a lot of companies, as it is called, in terms of the scope, the kind of work that they can do. And I think there will be a good segmentation of being a generalist and a specialist, depending upon the industries that they operate.
Absolutely. Right? Fully agree. I think we are in, I think all of us are lucky here to be in these exciting times. The world is changing, both in the positive and the negative, and which I am trying to converge towards. But I think interesting times, and I think we are in a phase in the era of planet Earth where we are rapidly moving, evolving, and AI is coming at a very good time where I think it's humans which need to evolve and do things and leverage them. Else it will just be something which dies down soon. But if you understand the power that it can bring to the table, I think you can change the dynamics of what you do and for your organization.
Yeah. And create much deeper impacts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that is where I'm going to kind of double down today, Tejas, with you, because, you have been part of the founding team at BigBasket. You have done 0 to 1, you've done 1 to 10, you've done 10 to 100. And if I just look at the startup ecosystem in India, a lot of companies today are in that zone of 1 to 10 and 10 to 100, right? Where we have a lot of these new unicorns coming up. Right. So I would like to ask you that, what changes for a product manager between these 2-3 phases, especially focusing more on, I would say, 10 to 100.
So, I've been through this journey, and I think I had to adapt, and I think I had to imbibe a lot of learnings and kind of keep adapting and changing the way we operate. So I'll break it down. Let's start with the 0 to 1 phase. You are in a very, very early stage. You're trying to get your product market fit. You might be a very small startup trying to raise money, or you're part of a larger setup trying to get a product out. The mindset here is very much agility. You are trying to get things out fast, kind of bring in a lot of value, build enough, not over-engineer, but build enough to try to prove the hypothesis that you have the right product for the market. And this needs constant talking to your customers, to your leadership, and trying to get things in shape so that you are able to capture a few customers, whichever segment you are in. I think someone should love your product, and this is your early adopter and evangelist. And as a PM, I think the mindset that one needs to get into is hustle, figure out ways and navigate, talk to your customers. So as a behavior, someone who is constantly having a sharper macro while at the same level a lot more customer empathy, a lot more product empathy than any other phases is where I would come in and put down at this phase. And this brings a term, at least going by our earlier conversation, a founder mode approach. The PM here wears the hat of a founder, literally imbibing the founder's values and culture and trying to get things done. So now let me jump to the 1 to 10 phase. This is a company which has just hit its product market fit. It has raised maybe 1 or even maybe 2 rounds of funding and wants to now scale up. Its product has been vetted by the market. Now, this is what I see it as a hypergrowth phase. And in this phase, essentially, your product is at a reasonable maturity level, but it might be slightly under the hood, slightly flaky. So the hat that a product manager needs to have is bring an element of stability. You can't be just running around and hustling all the time. There is a structure to the madness, and get in the right scalable level of code that you need to do, while at the same time getting into this hyper growth mode. This is when your team start to scale up. So the 0 to 1 phase typically has no PMs per se, but maybe a PM or so. The 1 to 10 are your early stage of PMs, right? You get maybe 4 or 5 PMs who are managing few areas, and they try to structure in a level of, there is some level of structure and coordination and trying to get things done while still eyeing the big prize, the growth, getting more clients, customers, etc. And this is where a lot of startups that you read about hitting closer to unicorn and scaling up. This is in the second to 5 years of journey. And then you have beyond the beyond 5 years, or more of a platform approach, I call it, or the scaled approach, where you have a reasonably large consumer base with a variety of consumers and having different expectations. You're trying to seek the next set of customers. It's not going to be super easy because you have scaled up. There are a lot of, the organization has scaled up with maybe a few more hierarchies, with few more structures, with few more processes, I would even say that. But in this kind of a structure where probably inter-department communication starts becoming a challenge, I think you need to bring sanity and sanctity to the whole process. So PMs here, typically, I would say get into some kind of a manager mode, right? Trying to manage their product, bring in the customer empathy goes down as we progress, and try to bring in some element of it. There's a lot more of stakeholders that one needs to talk to, right? So PMs in this phase are typically, there's less of a skin in the game in the final outcome. They don't see the macro picture. But I think they add a value in a part of the product, but it's a more stable structure, a more solid structure for the scalability of the company. So this is how I break it up. And from a product leadership perspective, I think the hiring mindset should also equally change. Having spoken about this, I think the one thing which will keep your organization or your function kind of be more I think agile, I would say, is to continue to bring in that element of culture and permeate it down. So culture always permeates top down. So as a product leader, and I spoke about the PMs, as a product leader, it's important that you don't lose out on the agility. You tend to slow down as you move to the 10 to 100 because of the complexity that comes in. But I think it's very relevant to keep your teams kind of motivated and try to keep them as agile as possible.
Very, very beautifully articulated in all the 3 phases. And one follow-up question, right? I mean, especially in the 3rd phase, right? You spoke about cultural aspect, how, you cannot be at the very hands-on at every feature level or every decision that is being made, right? And this is one conversation. I mean, there are a lot of different opinions people have that when you kind of grow up at that scale, should you kind of get into more a manager mode, or can you still hustle in a founder mode? What has been your experience? What has worked for you?
It's extremely hard to do a founder role because of the expectations of the organization and the scale. Like I said, the number of stakeholders can just start growing way too much. Now, how do you mold the organization in a manner where you become a founder even at a 10 to 100? I think it's more of an organization will. to bring not just the product function to operate in that mode, but the entire ecosystem or the rest of the functions. It's very hard to do this in silo, and I think it's even impossible. Because even if your team, you try to get them to kind of think like a founder and solve stuff, there are just so many functions there alongside who need to operate at the same cadence and same speed. So I think as a product leader, your task is to keep influencing and trying to tell your counterparts and the rest of the functions to operate in the same rhythm and try to bring that kind of a cadence. Else it starts getting bureaucratized, right? And as a leader, I think you need to cut through that and kind of bring in that more agility. It's not easy, let me tell you, because to get so many people on the same page, it takes a bit of human effort. And I think a leadership at the senior level needs to try to mold all of this together.
I agree. And that's why we will actually see that there are still not too many companies where they can still be able to sustain that startup mode, or delivering things very faster, because the bigger you get, you're right, there are so many minds, there are so many opinions and viewpoints, and getting a harmonization is definitely tough. And it's a constant effort from the leadership to make it happen, right?
So, but the true breakthrough companies actually who are able to do this, I think that's who you see as $1 trillion companies. They break through this. And I have always realized is that the message should come from the top at the CEO level, just saying, hey, we need to get this. It's a mission, and everyone needs to be harmonized and kind of work towards the same goal.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And when you are kind of operating at that level, right? I mean, typically when we talk about our product strategy, there are multiple ways we could go, right? Whether we should diversify. So as a product leader, when you are thinking about this, how do you channelize these things? Do you kind of, in the 10 to 100 phase, do you think companies should continue to double down on their core offering? Or do you think it makes much more sense to do more diversification?
Context. I think your business model and where you stand in the market and innovate. See, if you're a leader in your space, and companies and really people are looking up to you, they love your products and continue buying it, I think one needs to be wary of looking alongside and see what are others doing so that your dominance is not disrupted. So diversification should be strategic, and you need to look at what others are doing and open up your minds and what else you could do. And a great company here would be, say, like an Apple, right? Apple is comfortable with what it does. It also looks at what it's doing, and it doesn't let its market share go down. It keeps growing and growing because it doesn't necessarily diversify all the time. Now, let's take another example where companies need to diversify. When companies see that their core business starts probably getting slightly disruptive, maybe they are number 2, number 3, and they need to kind of figure out ways to do this. First, they need to double down on their core product and figure out other ways to bring your customers in, whether it's for a new product line or even, I would say, even bring in new set of features aligned to a particular area. So I think I don't have a black and white answer. I think the context and the business context and where a company sees itself depends. But I think one very historical insight I can give is there are very few companies which have lasted over tens of years, over decades, right? And the single thing that kind of glues all of them, all these companies, is they end up becoming market leaders, and at some stage they have also diversified enough so that even if there's a problem in any of their core products, earlier core products, that kind of subdues and the other product takes over a larger footprint, right? The important variable, just to close on this point, is the amount of bandwidth you need to put. This is very important because if you end up diversifying too much, also understand that the time spent by your senior executive kind of gets allocated in all these buckets. So more diversification, more focus needs to be put, and management bandwidth is at a premium. You just can't throw money at things. If your leadership is not spending time on some new initiatives or a particular function, there's no point doing it. It's better to cut them down and reduce your losses.
I think there are two takeaways that I completely agree with you. One is that it has to be very contextual to the work that you do. And based on that, you also need to look at internally what are your strengths, where does it make, and your users' trends, where are they going, and based on that, decide what should be the, even you need a course correction, for example, right? And continue to experiment. Now, when you're operating at that scale, right, how do you kind of do a balancing act of, let's say you spoke about, for example, innovating, sometimes if you look at companies like Walmart, right, they are one of the examples who have sustained as market leaders for a fairly long number of years, right? Where in some places they're disrupting themselves. Or they're saying that, okay, from brick and mortar, I want to be making equal amount of revenue from an omni-channel or an online stream as well, right? So as a product leader, right, how do you kind of bucketize your investment into, let's say, innovation versus incrementally improvising on the product, which is probably more business as usual, versus experimenting absolutely brand new ideas? How do you kind of bucketize that?
I look at it as a 50, 30, 20 bucket, at least. And the mind is structured in that way that 50% is improving your core proposition. Again, the numbers might vary based on the business context and what direction you've been given, but at a 50% level, you focus and keep improving your core product so that you continue to be extremely competitive or leading the market. The rest, the 30%, is something where there are new service lines and new products that you develop. And here, the amount of effort that you put in is also kind of proportional to the kind of value that that new product line is going to bring in. And it's very interesting. I mean, if you have a very high consumer facing kind of a business, which kind of starts bringing revenue, but maybe not in the volume, but very high potential, let me put it that way, then I think this number should even go much higher, because you look at that potential and keep investing in. But if it is in your tests, it just brings you barely too much revenue, then you kind of bring that 30 to maybe 10, 15, but it's important that you do that. And the last 20% is moonshots, right? Do something which kind of adds which could potentially add super value, but no testing done. You need to create these small buckets. And I think it's in this bucket that value of AI and I think some of the new tools we spoke about come, because you can quickly keep experimenting, try it out and see what your market is telling you.
Yeah. And these could become your, as you said, super value or sources of revenue for the next 5 years.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That constant transformation and disrupting and challenging the status quo is very, very important for companies to stay relevant.
So I mean, to summarize, your depth improvement, which is your 50%, and trying to add more value so that your old customers continue to love your product, right? Your 30% to start seeing something new and valuable coming up, maybe adding revenue. And 10 is just, oh my God, this is awesome.
Sorry, but we as product managers a lot of time are very, picky about frameworks, right? So if I have to just say, this is exactly what Innovation Ambition Matrix says, right? Where you kind of focus on your core competencies, build on adjacencies, and then the moonshots or the transformations that you spoke about, right?
Yeah, well, I haven't gone through that, but this is my framework. But it's good. I think I'm able to attach myself to one of these frameworks.
And that makes a lot of sense, right? And that is how you continue to stay relevant and be ready for future.
Yeah.
From your own experience, especially if I may want to get into a little bit in the commerce space, right? That's where you have kind of operated. How does the metrics looks like in these, different phases of growth? Especially between 1 to 10 and 10 to 100, what would be some of the big metrics as a product leader that you have been chasing?
One of the key metrics we would look at, and this is the entire product, not just the user interface, and talking more in context of a BigBasket, which has a huge operational backend, which does a lot of stuff there. I mean, a lot of metrics there. But I think there are core metrics, at least from a commerce market, finally comes down to your customer experience. I think as a North Star metric is how your consumers reacting to your product. And some of the proxies or ways to gauge this are NPS scores, your Play Store metrics, your on-time delivery rate, ratings, and how well you're doing, your fulfillment efficiency, in terms of whether you're picking all the stuff, delivering them to your customers. So some of these metrics matter a lot. For an organization, I think it's important to get the right metrics, because a lot of times, you might be trying to measure something which probably is not what your consumers want. And that might lead one to think that, hey, maybe I'm getting these numbers, I'm able to show these numbers, but maybe your consumers are not vouching for you. So at BigBasket, at least, we have had very good focus on metrics. I think we call it perfect orders or customer complaints, I think, as a North Star metric. And everyone is driven towards that, right? And then you, of course, under the hood, to break it into more buckets, we always had these on-time deliveries and stuff like that, which I just mentioned. A very key theme in the 1 to 10 and 1 to 100, and this permeates across all the three phases. A very common theme here is level of how sustainably you're doing this, right? When I use the word sustainability here in terms of unit economics, so I think most companies in the early phases, assuming they're funded, right, end up spending up more on the marketing side to gather more customers and all, which is fair. I think that's a good way to get your initial customers, but as a company, you need to be more sustainable. So towards the 10 to 100 phase, I think a very relevant metric that starts coming up, which I didn't speak about until now, is your, I'm calling it the margin metric or the unit economics metric. And that needs to start showing up in all your metrics, right? How well are you delivering? How efficient are you in delivering your orders? So, and I think while I spoke about the BigBasket framework, I think they should, at a large level, permeate across most industries and companies.
And that's what would make it a sustainable growth, right? Otherwise, your runway becomes, as you said, whether, for example, if it's about cash burning, giving discounts, there is only this much you can run. Versus if you bring in more sustainable thoughts in terms of how you're growing, then scaling becomes more achievable.
Yeah, and that should be the end goal. So I know there are a lot of companies or people who are just like, hey, unicorn. I think the metric that everyone should be excited about is like, hey, I've hit break even, or I'm hitting +2, +3. Unfortunately, the industry tends to, kind of glamorize a lot of the unicorn and, the status and more of a top line rather than the bottom line, which for me is completely incongruous to how I think.
But don't you think with the funding winter and things, people are now started to focus more on the break even, the profitability aspect?
And I'm glad for the funding winter, because I think finally this is the way companies need to be run.
Right.
I think try to focus on a more sustainable way of growing rather than, because you have been, since legacy companies has tried to do this, right? There's some cash flow, but they always look at finally how much profit you make. Your markets look at that, while markets have started to become a little bit more open about, bit of losses. I think the markets will definitely not kind of keep doing this for a long period of time. It's not sustainable, and I think you'll get hurt in the longer term if you don't grow profitably.
Yeah, no, that's true. Going to one of the part which you were talking about, right? Like commerce in itself, whether it is e-commerce, quick commerce, different ways. Social commerce is something, another facet of this. Now, these are very OpEx heavy, right? Now, while you spoke about the role of a PM in context of, when you're kind of growing up or scaling up your tech product, right? What is the role or how chaotic is it, from a scaling perspective, not only on the digital product capability side of it, but also making sure that your, the operating side of things are also growing up at the same pace. They are kind of harmonized because it's the entire cycle, right? And anywhere which is not aligned can hamper your customer experience.
Absolutely. So this is the very interesting area which I think very few people know or understand, that you might be just consuming an OTT, a movie, or you might be getting a delivery in 10 minutes, but under the hood there's tons and tons of hard work from operations, from tech and product, or whoever engineers. I think there's tons of stuff happening, and I think the real core of the whole machinery runs there. The app is more of just an interface, makes you feel good and order. So complex, and a PM, product managers, product leaders in this space really need to understand and have a much larger T-shaped view of an understanding of how the orchestration between each of these parts and what are the risks of something going down. We had a word called disaster management, one spoke in the wheel going down. How does that impact?
Agreed. And it could have a cascading impact. And that interlocking setup, for example, taking it from the warehouse, picked up by the delivery guy, the travel, then the final handover.
Absolutely.
And the whole back end of, if there are refunds, there are returns and stuff like that. How do you do the collections and kind of close the loop?
So the true intellectual horsepower of a lot of the companies out there in the market, which are done remarkably well in all domains across the world, the true product leaders, I think, are very heavily focused on the operational excellence and trying to bring that kind of a understanding on how each of these parts connect to each other and add value there, that, hey, we cannot have this. And this doesn't apply to pure commerce. It could be anything. It could be even an online and AWS setup, because what happens under the hood is the very, very critical part.
In fact, I probably want to talk about one example, right? One of the organizations where I worked, we were a seasonal product, right? Now, you don't do taxes throughout the year, right? You do taxes in those 2-3 months of the crucial year. And obviously, there are millions of your users who are filing taxes. Now, let's say for X million users, you need to have, let's say, X thousand agents to do the customer support, right? And it's a very high value, high touch thing, because you're talking about money. You're talking about a lot of money in some cases, right? So now you cannot be having X thousand agents throughout the year just to support those 3 months.
Absolutely.
Right? So I have firsthand witnessed that how we would kind of scale up just before the season and how beautifully we would scale down from a few hundreds to a few thousand just to support that madness of those 3 months.
Yeah.
So operational excellence is a super, super critical aspect of scaling up any
And every
product.
successful company,
Any successful company would have, I think, championed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of this thing. Now the next part that I want to come down is the most, I would say, hot category creator these days, which is basically quick commerce, right? I think BigBasket has been in commerce for a very long time. I am a loyal customer for more than 10 plus years.
Thank you.
Right? And I have seen how it has evolved, where from a next day delivery to a slotted delivery of the same day, then few hours, and now again, they are also one of the players where it kind of comes in a few minutes, right? But is this a sustainable model, right? I mean, I think if you would ask a couple of years back, we said that I don't need anything and everything in 10 minutes, right? But today, if you look at it 2 years down the line, it has become a lifestyle, right? People have developed habits. I think it's one of the brilliant example of a habit forming products where people know that I always have this choice. But from a sustainable growth perspective, is this business model sustainable?
Good question. I'll assume that most readers are aware of the quick commerce segment, but my takeaway, my understanding here is that it is a very hard to break even business. The only reason why this will continue to thrive and grow is because of consumer interest. And the winners here will be ones which capture micro markets. And companies which capture micro markets and lead there and kind of have a overall profitability, which is very hard to get if you look at it holistically. But micro markets winners and being leaders in each of these micro markets will end up becoming sustainable and profitable. So maybe if it didn't make sense, let me give you an example of a business which is extremely hyper local. And this has some analogy with your supermarket nearby. So when you get a supermarket, when you see a supermarket nearby, it captures a geographic area of say a kilometer, 2 kilometers or so. And based on the kind of rental that you pay and the number of footfalls and the sales that you make, you overall look at that store's break even, right? Now, a similar kind of an analogy now needs to be applied to a quick commerce store, which is in your area. If you are a number 2, number 3, number 4, I would say, and you barely are getting footfalls or orders, I would say, in a quick commerce context, it will be hard to break even. So I call this a single store model as a micro market. And sustainable companies, the companies which will finally be profitable, are able to get enough density of orders within that radius from that store and make money. I think that's the true blue future that we're looking at it. Having said that, this business needs a lot of cash to be able to sustain and reach that stage so that a majority of stores start breaking even and start making money. And the money that you're talking about is also not much because a lot of margins go into kind of getting this supply chain in place. Companies will evolve, they'll find new monetization methods and all. So the true end goal, I think there will be companies which will be sustainable. It's a very hard play here compared to a lot other areas, a lot other segments which become profitable with a little bit of fine tuning, tweaking here and there. This will ultimately be sustainable, but it's going to take a long time. But also understand that grocery is a large market. So quick commerce is probably just around 3-4%, 2%, 3%. And there's the whole country that you need to capture. There are still people going out. So there's a lot of play here. So my final summary would be that I don't think too many players will survive. I would say maximum 3 to 4 players will survive because the category is that big. Everyone needs their groceries, and even now more categories are growing in going hyper local, going quick commerce. So maybe 3 to 4 players, but the winners will be the one who do their micro market thinking well and are able to profitably grow this. There's no point being number 4 in a locality where you are not getting enough density after a point in time.
Yeah. And now a harder question. Is quick commerce hurting local merchants?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of companies might not talk about this or likely vocalize this as much, but this is the real disruptor for the mom and pop stores. Now, while I think why is it a lot harder to answer this question is because it is happening at a much subdued pace. So you might not be able to call out very bluntly and clearly, hey, you're disrupting it or you're not disrupting it. It's a more gradual process, but in 5 years, I would dare say that the market share of the kiranas would go down easily by 20 percentage points as more and more quick commerce, because this is at least a sector which is more disruptive than say the other slotted deliveries, because there is still the kiranas were offering a differentiation of giving you something right now, whereas the slotted guys they were still 2 hours, 3 hours, or maybe next day. So the really impatient people or someone who just wanted to go out for a stroll and get it would be able to still do that. But this is literally competing with that same sector, and with the current level of offers and kind of discounts that go in, I think it's going to definitely impact in the mid to long term.
I think, yeah, probably new business models may need to evolve to see if there is a way for them to grow together.
So see, that's the interesting point. While they might be impacting kiranas, now how about these guys innovating and doing something very different to keep that? I still think the mom and pop stores have enough in them to be able to do a lot, and because they truly understand how retail works. So if they don't innovate, they die. But if they innovate and find new ways of servicing their customers and building, because they still retain that human connect, which a lot of the quick commerce players don't, right? So if they are able to diversify their categories in the same way how the quick commerce guys are doing, and are able to offer a WhatsApp like very seamless experience with still that human touch available, maybe these are innovations that I can think about. But it's truly possible. I would still love to talk to my neighboring chacha who's able to deliver if he's able to manage this, right? But it's rare to find such merchants.
Yeah, I mean, I think time will tell, but we'll look forward, because I think what we look at is the larger economy and the larger innovations to disrupt our customer for convenience and for value.
Absolutely, yeah, true.
Okay, I'm going to now switch to, the work that you're doing more recent, right? You have kind of moved from quick commerce to sustainability causes, right? So I would love to understand in what you're building now, if you want to talk a little bit about that. And what is your perspective? What changes from a PM's lens in context of sustainability?
Sure, great question. on the PM side. So let me tell you what I'm doing. So I've been very passionate about the concept of sustainability. Now it's a very broad word. Where I come from is primarily a larger focus on how the world where we live in probably isn't going to be livable in the long term, looking at what we see in terms of climate change. At this point in time, Delhi is unlivable. You're seeing so much of, reading so much about it. And I dare say, the world is headed in a direction where most cities are going to be unlivable if we don't, at a micro level, at a macro level, as a country and as a globe, don't do anything. In my view, this is like a mission that the whole world needs to take upon themselves, similar to what the whole world did for the pandemic. I see it as almost a mission of sorts. The problem here is, I think there are a lot of climate skeptics who don't think, because it's still subdued enough that, and these are events which happen far and in between. So people don't think about putting give it that much focus. But yes, the world is changing. Now, I think where I stand in, where I try to see this is the change makers are corporations, companies, because finally they create products for humans to consume. And if you enable them to create products which are sustainable, you are making an impact to the ecosystem downstream, right? And simple examples, we spoke about this. We see a huge amount of plastic bottles. We consume water in a plastic bottle. Suppose the makers of these plastic bottles decide to go biodegradable, friendly ways of doing things. Your emissions are less, wastage is less, you're doing something good. And very interestingly, the most important insight I can give you is the economics works in a manner that once you hit a particular threshold of scale or demand, this invariably turns out to be cheaper. And in this context, I can, like a biodegradable bottle might end up becoming positive for a company in terms of margins, etc. I'll give you a very simple example. You see how electric scooters have started taking a foot in India. And interesting data point I can share is, I run an EV, so a bike, and I see that it consumes only 1 to 2 rupees of power that I need to run for a kilometer. Very simple when I use a renewable energy and kind of power it. But if I use a non-renewable way to power this, I'm consuming closer to almost 3 to 4 rupees. And if I'm using a fossil fuel like your petrol or diesel, I'm consuming 7 to 8 rupees. So while there might be a first time initial investment, over a longer period of time, I'm variably much positive in terms of, I'm doing great for the climate too, but I'm doing everything sustainably, right? This is a very simplistic example on how economies of scale do. And right now, interestingly, we are also seeing that, your solar power installation and your ability to do a solar fitting and all, it's far cheaper to run than you trying to get something, from a fossil fuel, which is oil is at $100, right? So I think at economies of scale, the world invariably changes, and these companies are starting to make money, the renewable, and they are listing on the stock markets and doing really well. So the future is this. And this is just an example of how we evolve as a civilization to do good things for the sustenance of the next generation. Something I'm passionate about, and I see that climate change is also hurting this if we don't do this fast enough. So my focus will be to build a tech product. Like you have a SaaS product for so many things that we do. You have it for your accounting, you have it for supply chain, etc. My focus is to build something just for sustainability. There are few of them out there around the world, but my focus will be to build something solid in this space, something that I think the world needs at this time, and also give companies a view that they can actually make money by bringing sustainability into their DNA.
No, that sounds brilliant. And I think now what earlier you and I were talking about with this whole ESG mandate coming in, I think more and more companies should take it as a mandate and go towards that, right? And as a product manager who needs to not only think about from a business perspective, but also, from a compliance perspective and how this makes sense I think one of the things which you and I were discussing is that in the coming era, a product manager needs to be much more commercially be evolved, right? So this directly has a direct impact on how the product can be consumed and how you probably achieve your break even much more faster.
Yeah, very simple example. A product manager in a quick commerce industry will know this very clearly. At least the operational product managers will know this, that running an EV is much better for the organization, and it just helps overall in the economics, and it's good for the environment. So a PM there should be thinking, how do we bring in more electric fleet into the ecosystem, right? So these are very simple nuances, but this can be expanded to any kind of a PM work that you do. Interestingly, the kind of server space that you take, I mean, there's a lot of wastage happening, and also there are emissions when you have huge data centers, and also sustainability also plays a role in making your business efficient, because if there's a lot of wastage, be it of either a tech form or any kind of a form, how are you kind of bringing that down, being more efficient while also reducing your footprint? So going back to one of the question that you asked is, as a PM, you need to know what this causes, whether this causes harm to your company, to your employees, to the ecosystem in general. And if you are able to think about these questions, hey, can I do more electric because it costs less, and ask these relevant questions, right? I think you're going to do a lot of good for the company and generally for the ecosystem.
That's right. And yeah, I think those are some additional lenses, I think I would say in the coming years that the PM job would ask for.
Evolve. It has to evolve there.
It has to evolve, yeah. No, thank you, Tejas. Those were some brilliant answers. I have now the last section, which is the rapid fire round. Yeah, just a few questions on your way. Scaling fast, is it a blessing or a curse?
Blessing.
Product market fit or operational scalability, which is harder to achieve?
Product market fit is harder to achieve.
Okay. Is hiring experienced leaders early overrated for scaling startups?
Not really. Based on the context, I think it makes sense.
Is the focus on speed in commerce killing innovation in customer experience?
No.
Are AI algorithms used in quick commerce biased in favor of certain products or areas?
In some areas, yes. Not in all areas.
Okay. So maybe where it is fast moving, they are kind of more optimized for that?
Yes.
Right. All right. That was a wrap, and that's a brilliant, brilliant conversation, Tejas. Thank you so much for taking the time out, sharing some very, very deep nuggets, of how has been your experience. And I'm sure there are tons of takeaways for people. And I think we have added a brand new, I would say, dimension here of sustainability and how people can think about sustainability while they're still scaling up their businesses.
Awesome. I love talking to you. Thank you so much for having me here.
My pleasure.